from an institutional investor standpoint, there are certain types of assets or investments that traditionally have done extremely well. Examples that come to mind might be like oil and gas, obviously coal, tobacco. And there are a lot of investors, especially institutional investors, that have decided that they're going to divest of those particular types of investments or asset classes, despite the fact that they traditionally have performed extremely well, or despite the fact that they may outperform other types of investments in the future. How does that fit into the idea that you're describing of looking at this solely from a future risk mitigation and therefore like long-term sustainability or profitability standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because gasoline is still legal, right?
Yes.
Tobacco, in most of its forms is still legal in many countries around the world. So it's
Yeah.
not solely or strictly the law that's pushing them away. It's either like the individual investor or industry type of standards that are like, causing them to move in that direction.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would maybe go back to what we said at the beginning. Maybe the evolution of the entire sustainable finance, sustainable investing.
Yeah.
Right. I mentioned that maybe at the very beginning it would be mostly about these exclusions or maybe boycotting of certain industries, companies. Right.
Yep.
So that's certainly one way to do it. Let's say I don't know. For one reason or another, you do not want to invest in the oil and gas sector or tobacco sector, right? Okay, you don't do it,
Just
right?
don't do it.
You stay away.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, you can miss out on perhaps some returns, and again, then depends, maybe what is more important to you, maybe sticking to your values, or you actually, want that exposure. So that's one thing. Of course, when you are applying exclusions, that just means, you completely kind of isolate yourself from that area, whether it's good or bad. But that's just one way to do this, right? Another one is what we call more of an integration of these factors in the financial decisions, and that would mean that you do not simply need to divest or exclude these companies, industries from your investments, but you can also work with these companies to perhaps improve their profile, right? So we are talking now, say, divestment versus engagement with the companies, right? So if you are a major investor in a company, and that depends, of course, on your hard or soft power, right? So hard power, if you have the voting rights, if you have majority of votes, you can at least you can actually kind of vote on the company to maybe change some things.
Which a lot of institutional investors have done.
Exactly, or even the soft power, right? Even if you don't maybe have majority voting power, but you are a major even creditor for the company, depends on your relationship with the company. I think you should have some, or are expected to have some influence on the company, right? Because the company would likely not want to lose you as a creditor, right?
Yeah.
Or an investor. So you can definitely influence companies in these ways, and perhaps point attention to some of these issues or risks, and work with the company on addressing them. The last thing I would mention is, and this is actually how our ESG ratings work, is that we do not, or let me rephrase, what we do is that we rank companies relative to their peers in the same industry, right?
Right.
Because from our point of view, it doesn't make sense to compare financial companies, let's say insurers, and oil and gas companies with the same criteria, right? They have entirely different business models, entirely different risks they are facing. So if we compare them directly, it would hardly make any sense from our point of view, right? Instead of what we do is that our ratings are always relative to the peers in your own industry, right? So that means even if you want to stay, let's say, invested in oil and gas or any other industry that you mentioned, tobacco or anything you might find problematic from one way or another, is that you can still pick the companies within these industries that perform better on these assessments than their peers, right?
So it's not limiting, it's just informative and helps people make better decisions with their investments based on these different criteria.
Exactly. So yeah, to answer your question, you know, the exclusion and possibly missing out on things is not the only way to act on sustainability risks and opportunities, right? Can also go this way, you know, even within the same industry, if you have very optimistic look on an industry you still want to stay in, okay, you can at least, you know, go for the better companies, if I can say it like that, versus the worst ones, right? So there are ways.